author Tim Cohen. Well, thank you for tuning in. We've got an absolutely mind-blowing interview this evening with author Tim Cohen. I've watched his work. It uses a lot of images, folks, and the symbolism, the images, the way the dots are connected.
Hi, Di. We worked it out.
I guarantee they certainly were with me when I watched his other stuff. But huge thank you for coming on, my friend. Tim's link, his website is in the description box. The book's out there as well. Please support his important work. And what got you into this in the first place, Tim? Because you was in the military, wasn't you?
I was. First, thanks for having me on the show. A little bit looking forward to this. So,
Diane, this will be interesting what he says about Trump.
I appreciate it. In 1987, I was a cadet at the United States Air Force Academy, and I had been a Christian for less than a year at that point. I became a Christian in November of 1986. And from that point of becoming a Christian, I'd started to read voraciously through Scripture and eventually made my way to Revelation 13.
Yeah.
Read the book of Revelation, 2 or 3 times, and finally I just asked,
Di, if it wasn't for Gabe, I wouldn't be able to stream. She fixes everything so often.
the Lord one afternoon. I said,
They
what
don't
is
go
this talking
away?
about
No.
in Revelation 13? So
She's going away for 2 weeks in a couple of minutes, saying, going to miss her. Then I hope nothing goes wrong.
Revelation 13 has 2 beasts in the chapter and then a name calculation at the end of the chapter. And I was reading about that strange imagery, particularly of that first beast, which is described as a beast that feet like a bear, body like a leopard, mouth like the mouth of a lion. It says that this dragon gives this beast his power, throne, and great authority. In the prior chapter, Revelation 12, it tells us that's a fiery red dragon, and it's also identified explicitly as the devil, as Satan himself, and as the serpent who deceived Eve in the Garden of Eden, Revelation 12. So this dragon, the devil, is giving this beast his power, throne, and great authority. And I'm saying to the Lord, okay, what is this? There's no such thing in nature, right? Is this going to be some sci-fi-like chimeric hybrid that comes along at some point? Or, what is this, right? Because I was convinced at that point that Scripture was literal, that it was literally true, and it was meant to be taken literally. But here's something that you can't really take literally, I thought. And so I'm saying, okay, God, would you please show me who and what is being spoken of here? And of course, at that point in my life, one of my least favorite subjects of all was history.
Diane, Sean Atwood, the guy whose interview it is, do you watch him? Are you subbed to him?
I have
He's got a lot of good whistleblower stuff.
next to zero knowledge of the British monarchy, just the minimal stuff I had to learn in high school to get through history and so forth, and no real interest in the topic. But then as I asked the Lord that, within days to a month, I had the core evidence identifying that beast with the literal imagery in my possession. And as it turned out, there was only one book in the world at that point that had the
Diane, Mum's lucky to dial a phone.
actual imagery, the official imagery published, and that was Boutell's heraldry. And it happened to be that the cadet library at the Air Force Academy had that one book on heraldry and just a couple of dozen books on heraldry on its shelf.
Yeah.
Out of hundreds and hundreds of books on heraldry. So I found the imagery. I had the name calculation that another pastor had who was in Colorado Springs. I was a Messianic Jew, a young Hebrew Christian at that point, Israelite Christian, an actual Cohen by birth. And this pastor one day on a Shabbat, I had lunch at his home, and he was an engineer working for Martin Marietta, and he just pulled out this thing that he and some other engineers had put together, and he said, hey, take a look at this. And it was the result of a computer program that they wrote to calculate the values of the names of prominent world figures. Martin Marietta engineer, and one of the names that they threw into their system was Charles, Prince of Wales. Well, the system that they used happened to be the correct system. And I'll go into that when we talk about the name calculation. Almost every system that people have used to try to show so-and-so is 666 has not been the correct system. Well, this one was. And the system is actually identified in the Greek text of Revelation 13. Most people don't know that. So the title Charles, Prince of Wales, spat out in English on that system as 666.
Okay, this was only yesterday, Di.
And it's a sequential system, not phonetic. So, kind of like
I'm not
ASCII,
going yet.
you know, if anybody's
Don't
familiar with
get
computer
hung,
programming
But
and the
I'm putting
ASCII
these in the car. I'm not going yet.
symbolic code, you know, for early programming, it's along those lines where you've got a number assigned to each letter or character in a sequence. So it's sequential. And yeah, so that inspired me to go back to, you know, the academy and look in the cadet library to see what more I could find. And I came up with the official heraldic achievement, in this case of Charles as Prince of Wales. And turns out it has on it the beast with feet like a bear, body like a leopard, mouth like a lion. It also has the red dragon of Wales on it, which, as it turns out, is the actual red dragon spoken of in Revelation 12 and 13. That dragon historically goes back thousands of years, and you can trace it all the way to the standards of the Roman cohorts that occupied ancient Judea. So John would have seen his version of it in his day, the one that ultimately led to the dragon of Wales, historically. The Apostle
Wow.
John.
We've got 666 people watching across all platforms presently.
Wonderful. Okay.
When John saw the dragon and described it, before he knew about this, I was picturing, wow, he's going to see a real dragon. But he's talking about Charles' flag, his coat of arms or whatever. So he saw a flag, not a real dragon, but it sounded good.
What is the first image you'd like us to put on the screen?
Let's look at the cover of the first edition of the Antichrist Decrepity, published in 1998. Now, folks, I began writing the book in 1987. The second edition, which we'll see afterwards, was published in 2024, massively updated. So, yeah, if you could pull the first edition up on the screen. I don't know if I'll see it when you're sharing it, but you can let me know when people are able to see it.
Yeah, there's the screen. He's going to put that next image up.
Yeah,
on
it's
the
under
screen.
First Beast, the First Beast folder.
No way! There's Charles riding a dragon. Oh, he's king now. Wow, he's going to get coins made in his likeness.
Okay, if you want to work on that one, Ben. In the meantime, viewers, we've got almost 1,000 watching live right now. Here we go.
All right, so what you're looking at on to us looks like the left-hand side, and Heraldry it's the right-hand side because the beast is looking at you in Heraldry. So the beast that looks like a lion, leopard, bear beast on that left-hand side normally would be a lion or lion leopard representing England. And if one were to go and look at Queen Elizabeth II's official heraldic achievement, you'd see a normal lion right there. If you were to look at William's or Harry's, you'd see a lion or a lion leopard. What you wouldn't see is the exaggerated feet, you know, that have bear-like claws. And so I'll point you to one other folder where we can see those claws a bit more clearly. Hopefully I sent that. Hope I didn't forget it. Give me just one moment. I'm going to see if I even gave you that.
Yeah, you're fine. Take your time. And viewers, Tim's website link is in the description box if you want to check out his work.
Okay. Yeah, it's under the folder dealing with the 1969 investiture. So if you'll go for a moment to the 1969 investiture folder, in that I show one of two versions of the graven heraldic achievements that was hung over the Queen's Gate. If you want to show that one, Ben. Hanging over the Queen's Gate. There's a subfolder with that. But at any rate, there were two versions hung over the Eagle's Gate and the Queen's Gate at Caernarvon Castle at the July 1969 investiture for Charles, where that heraldic achievement that's on the cover of the Antichrist Antichrist book was first shown to the world. And the graven versions, they have an appearance of...
Diane, I think that's caused by that 3-eye atlas. I think that's what's upsetting all the weather and volcanoes.
Cast iron, though they were actually made of plaster and painted to look like cast iron. And they're very large, and the devices are separated, the devices on the overall heraldic achievement. So then if you go to the folder that says graven arms, you'll find in that some images that show one of the versions of the heraldic achievement as if it were graven, as if it were cast iron. But the reason I show that is the claws on that beast that has feet like a bear, body like a leopard, mouth like a lion on the cover of the book. The two graven versions, it's very obviously bear's claws that they actually used for the feet of that beast. So this is the one at the Queen's Gate, and it actually has bear's claws. And if you go to the folder that the folder that's next to that, that says graven bear's claws, Ben. Now leave that image and go to the folder that says graven bear's claws. And that one I've shown enlargement. Yeah, that's the claws of a bear, so people can see what they look like. Now go to the image that is grayscale, black and white, but grayscale, of bear's claws on Charles Eaglegate graven achievement. So
Diane, people like L.A. Marzulli, they're looking into this atlas. I think it might be more than what they think.
show the claws blown up, enlarged from the version that was hung over the Eagle's Gate. So people can see that they actually use bear's claws on those graven versions. If you're able to pull that image up, it is just the folder above where you are. And it says bear's claws on Charles Eaglegate graven heraldic achievement. Now go up one folder higher than that.
It's like a lot of this stuff is in plain sight, but we don't know how to interpret it.
Yeah, and so that's what I'm doing. You'll notice, though, around the Queen and Charles in this image that's being displayed, you have the red dragon shown on either side, and in the center you have what's known as the badge of the Black Prince.
Come on, jump
And
on.
that is the image that is on the ring, the signet ring that Charles has worn for decades, that gold ring, that he even wore when he was crowned king in 2023 on his finger. That badge of the Black Prince goes back to the 14th century, and it ties in with the Order of the Garter and other things that we may get to. But at any rate, you can see the red dragon there.
Order of the Garter. To be in that, you've got to go to their rituals and all that, Diane. And Beckham, the football player, he's just been knighted, Sir David Beckham. So he's in all that stuff as well.
With the unicorn, the lion, leopard, bear, beast, and then, of course, Charles and the Queen appeared in the center of that at the Queen's Gate. Ben, if you can go up one folder above where you are and show that bear's claw image, I want people to see that if you're able to locate it. But at any rate, Charles and his mother appeared here right after he was crowned in July 1969. So you're in the bear's claw folder, Ben. That's not what we want. We want the folder above that. But that does let people see very clearly what bear's claws look like.
Jeez. They're deadly looking, aren't they?
So I'm putting Tim's website link
Yeah,
in the live chat
that
as well.
folder. So next to that image, Ben, is one that's grayscale with a bear's claws, the one that I want to show. So what you're seeing on your screen there, Sean, is bear's claws on the left and lions on the right.
Right.
Now, lions have a sheath into which they can withdraw their claws. Bears do not.
Diane, there's just too many coming out and saying that Atlas is more than whatever. Let's not forget 6 months ago, them drones, one got stuck in a tree and it was plasma inside a steel encasing. And they reckon that's what's going on with Atlas. It's like that.
And they're shorter.
Oh. So they've got the claws out all the time.
All the time.
Mm.
Okay, so anyway, next to that, if we can pull it up, is an enlargement of the graven version at the Eagle's Gate. Right next to that image, Ben.
And thank you to everyone in the chat that's putting in the comments, saying they're blown away by this.
Guy, I might do tomorrow show on Atlas then. If you're on board as well, I might do that and see what we got.
Tim sure has done his homework.
Okay, well, I'll go on and describe some other things on that heraldic achievement that we'll come back to once Ben finds that image. So you have the lion, leopard, bear, beast. You have the red dragon of Wales. You also have a unicorn. The unicorn is unusual on his heraldic achievement as Prince of Wales because it has human eyes. It doesn't have the normal round, solid eye that you would see, for example, on a horse with no visible sclera or eye white. And the eye socket is also V-shaped on that unicorn. And there's a chain restraining that unicorn that is called a restrainer in heraldry. That's officially what it's called. And on that official version from 1969, it's restrained. Now, there's another version I show in the book where it's loosed, and it's officially called loosed in heraldic terminology. But in both cases,
Wow, that's pretty impressive.
the unicorn has human eyes, and it takes on a deathly appearance. You know, like not just a mean appearance, but a
Stop up and
deathly
down.
appearance. In the second version of the heraldic achievement that I show inside the book, where the chain is loosed. So that is speaking to the future. That second version of the heraldic achievement in the book. And it's speaking to the point where he's possessed by the devil in the future by the red dragon. But Ben, are you able to find that image?
He sent me a message saying it's not in this. It's not in the folder.
Not in the folder. Okay. Can I share my
Yeah.
screen to show it?
Are you able to?
I should be able to.
Let's see.
I can certainly try, and we'll see how that goes.
Okay.
Okay.
Let's see if I can,
Oh,
if I
okay,
can do it, or maybe even just share a window potentially. Let me see if it lets me do it.
I'm just gonna write a list of what pros and things are in there. Just look in the freezer, everything's written.
Should let me choose the screen.
We'll talk every day. Oh.
Okay.
Oh.
You have to enable the audience to see what I'm sharing. Do you see the clause that I'm showing?
Right. Let's see. Are they the grizzly claws?
Yep.
Oh, we've seen
They
that.
are the large grayscale one.
This
Not
one.
that. The screen that I'm sharing.
Let's have 1 second. It's
There you go. You have it.
Oops.
Yep.
that one.
Yep. That one. So that's an enlargement of the claws of that Dexter beast, or what looks like the left-hand beast to us, of the graven version that was over the Queen's Gate, or excuse me, the Eagle Gate. And let me just do an automatic adjustment here, make it a little bit easier perhaps to see. So you can see the length of those claws, and there's no sheath to withdraw them.
Yeah.
And there's actually 5 on this. One you can sort of see on the right-hand side. The other one is behind the compartment on which its foot is resting. But the point is, those are not lion's claws. So they kind of went out of their way to make that obvious in the graven versions at his July 1969 investiture versus the artistic version that is otherwise shown. And if I go back here for a moment to show that artistic version. Oh. And I'll just show it on my screen for a moment. So you can see the claws here on this beast, right?
Yeah, I'll do Atlas tomorrow, Di, for sure.
Yep.
There are actually 5. Normally in an heraldic line, you'd see 3 or 4, but there are 5. The 5th one is hidden behind the foot in the compartment, behind this thing that the foot is resting on. But at any rate, this beast is like. So folks understand that Scripture doesn't say it's the lion's mouth, that it's or the lion's head, or the leopard's body, or the feet of the bear. It doesn't say that. What it says is like. It says feet like the feet of a bear, body like the body of a leopard, mouth like the mouth of a lion. In other words, it reminds us of that when we see it. So we can see the proportions of the body here are slender, like you'd see on a leopard, right? The claws are exaggerated, like you'd see on a bear, and more obviously on the graven versions. And then the head is somewhat lion-like, right? It's not a normal lion or lion leopard representing England. And then you have the unicorn, which would normally represent Scotland over here. And it's got human eyes. You can see it's got a visible eye white, sclera, right there. Right?
Yep.
And in the other version inside the book, it's much more obvious, and it's human eyes even. It's got the V-shaped eye socket. So, and then you have this chain that's called a restrainer, and it's bound in the lower right-hand corner, meaning it's connected to that compartment next to the red dragon, right?
Mm-hmm.
They call that bound, and it's a restrainer. The chain is in heraldry. That's loosed in the other version that I show in the book, and the hoof is lifted, and the dragon is touching this compartment in that other version, and the unicorn is rearing back. Now, there are two sons of perdition in Scripture. And in the New Testament, Judas Iscariot, a verse is quoted from the Old Testament of him saying that he raised his foot, or his hoof, is what the Hebrew text actually says, against the Lord. He's the son of perdition, Judas was, because he was possessed by the devil. The Antichrist is also called the son of perdition in 2 Thessalonians chapter 2, and he will, in the future, our future still, be possessed by Satan. At that point, this chain, this restrainer will be loosed, and the devil will be possessing Charles. Now, I'll point one other thing out here before I move on. You see this thing around the neck of the unicorn that looks like three horns that are plucked up by the roots?
Yep.
That's called the label of the eldest son in heraldry. It's around the neck of the unicorn. It's around the neck of this lion, leopard, bear beast right here. It's around the neck of the second version of the lion, leopard, bear beast up top above the crown, at the top of the heraldic achievement. It's most notably around the neck of the red dragon. He's telling us that Satan is going to become the eldest son.
Hey, Vas, good to see you, mate.
That the devil himself and Charles are going to become one and the same, is what the imagery is signifying. And then notice that it is also around the neck of the corporate heraldic achievement right here. Now, in Scripture, a horn has three different shapes. One is like an elephant's tusk, or curved like you see on the helm here. This is the sovereign's helm in heraldry. Charles, even though he was only Prince of Wales at the time, was given the sovereign.
Vas, Canada and Australia had fought together in war. We're very close in war. We really complemented each other.
Helm from the beginning.
I think that was World War One.
Same helm his mother had, even though she was monarch. That was very strange. He's always been viewed, in other words, as the sovereign from July 1969. But anyway, this is seven horns biblically in a head, if you will. This is the corporate head of the overall heraldic achievement. In heraldry, this is a corporate beast. The whole thing corporately represents Charles because of this label.
If Charles is the Antichrist, like this guy proves, Vas, William's not going to take his place.
The eldest.
And I don't believe he's been gone for months as well. You say that about everyone. You do, mate.
Son that's in the center right here. So Charles is the little horn with the eyes of a man. He is the beast of feet like a bear, body like a leopard, mouth like a lion. He is ultimately to be the red dragon, or the red dragon. The devil is to be him. And the reason I pointed out these horns here is there are two other shapes for horns that fit the biblical text, both the Hebrew and the Greek.
Well, Vas.
One is conical, like you see here on the unicorn.
Gabe's just gone away for 2 weeks. She just left then. So it's going to be a very quiet 2 weeks for me.
Horn right here.
I can stream longer, though.
Right?
Mm-hmm.
That's nobody disputes that's a horn. Another is shaped like a chemistry vial or flask, like you see for these three, as if they were plucked up by the roots on this label of the eldest son. So what Scripture describes for the little horn and the 10 kings, the Antichrist, when his global government is constituted, as he is described in Daniel chapter 7, and we'll perhaps look at that chapter later. But in Daniel 7, he is called a little horn with the eyes of a man, who comes up among 10 horns, 3 of which are plucked up.
Yeah, vast. King Charles owns a quarter of the planet. This guy speaks about it, actually. It says in the end that the Antichrist will rule for over so many. The Commonwealth's the only one that's already established as an empire on its own right.
By the roots. That is the imagery you're looking at right here. These are the 10 horns in the center for the corporate heraldic achievement. 3 are plucked up by the roots. The little horn of the eyes of a man, the unicorn of human eyes, comes in among them. Now, in the context of the book of Daniel, in the Old Testament,
You're a stirrer.
that was understood to be a unicorn. That imagery of a little horn, a unicorn with human eyes. And that's what you're looking at right here. Now, interestingly, that unicorn looks pale gray, right? And that's because the color combination that you're looking at here.
Hey, Shawnee, good to see you.
Is CMYK, cyan, magenta, yellow, and key, or black, that's used for book covers ordinarily. But when you look at this heraldic achievement in RGB, red, green, blue, the same achievement after it's been scanned in RGB and it's not on the cover of a book, the unicorn has a slightly different appearance.
That's true, Di.
So this one I'm showing in RGB rather than CMYK. You can't see it on the color of the book, but on the cover of the book, but notice the green hue right here.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
It's the color of rotting human flesh. Now,
guys, we've already seen this Herald one. Should I jump up to where he speaks about Pope Leo?
Why is that significant? It's pale green gray, in other words. Why is that significant? If we look in Revelation chapter 6, verses 7 to 8, and I'll just pull it up for a moment here so that folks can see it. And I'll go to Revelation chapter 6. This is speaking of the 4th horseman of the apocalypse. When you look at the color.
Hey, I can't say your name, but hi, welcome back to the channel.
It might say something like pale, a pale horse, like I'm highlighting right here.
Oh, okay.
Horse,
thanks,
right?
Carmen.
Some translations will say pale gray or something like that. But the Greek text from which this is translated is chloros, and it means pale green gray. And the literal meaning is the color of rotting human flesh. And the name of the rider of this horse, the 4th horseman, is Death. Now that's a title that's actually given to the devil himself in the New Testament. The last enemy that will be swallowed up is death. And that's the devil. So in other words, it's the devil himself who is the rider of this horse. He's the 4th horseman. But I just showed, based on that imagery, on Charles' heraldic achievement as Prince of Wales. And by the way, folks, he's still forever.
Thanks, guys. With what I stream, I only watch the first 5 minutes to see how the audio and that's going to go and to make sure they're not being too blasphemous. So I don't know what I watch either. So it's just as fun for me as well.
21st Prince of Wales. Just because he's King Charles III doesn't mean he isn't still the Prince of Wales. He is. He's still the 21st Prince of Wales forever. That heraldic achievement for him as Prince of Wales still pertains. Nothing has changed about that. He just gained additional heraldic achievements and devices as king. That's the only thing that happened. So the point is, Charles himself, when he's possessed by the devil, per the imagery on that heraldic achievement as first beast, will be death. That's who he will be. And that unicorn, that little horn in the eyes of a man, in Daniel chapter 7, is said to rule for 3.5 years preceding Christ's return at Armageddon. In Revelation chapter 13, that first beast, which is where we get that imagery of the beast with feet like a bear, body like a leopard, mouth like a lion, in this chapter, that first beast is said to be the one that rules for 3.5 years preceding Christ's return. In other words, they're the same individual. two different sets of imagery split across the Old and New Testament for the same
Wow.
person. Now, have you ever heard, Sean, and I don't know if your audience has heard this, what Charles' code word is with our Secret Service when he visits the United States?
No.
Unicorn. That's what they call it. That's his official code name.
Wow.
So, and when he was flying choppers and other aircraft for the RAF, he wore a Red Dragon patch on his jumpsuit. What was his code word or code name there? Red Dragon. That's what they called him. So he has the imagery. In other words, he's got the beast, the feet like a bear, body like a leopard, mouth like a lion. He has the little horn, the eyes of a man imagery. What does that mean? That means we can uniquely for Charles, of all people in the history of the world, ever, even today, we can do the name calculation legitimately for the very first time. Why do I say legitimately for the first time? Because in Revelation 13:18, there is a context that is required, and everybody's been ignoring this and overlooking it. There's a required context to do the calculation. And without that context, the calculation has actually no meaning in terms of identifying the top dog antichrist of history, if you will. And that's who we're talking about. There are lots of antichrists in the world. So the title of this interview today mentions Pope Leo also, right? Is he the antichrist? Is it Charles? Who is it? This kind of thing. Well, undoubtedly, the popes of Rome have been antichrists, no question about it. But biblically, there are lots of antichrists in history and multiple antichrists in the last days preceding Jesus' return. But there's one individual to rule them all, one top dog antichrist, if you will, and that's who we're talking about right now. And he's identified with this name calculation and this imagery. And the imagery is, it says, here is wisdom, let him who has understanding. So somebody will do this. So that's the first point I guess I'll make, Sean, is that Scripture is telling us that before this person shows up on the scene and has his global government for 3.5 years, somebody's going to identify him and do this calculation. It's right here in the Bible. The fact that this verse is here, it's telling us we'll know it ahead of time, who he is. The church will know. And those who are paying attention will know. So it says, let him who has understanding calculate the number of the beast, for it is the number of a
Will they care though?
man. So that's a new piece of information. This beast, this strange chimeric beast that I couldn't understand, and I was asking God, who and what is this talking about, is a human being. He's a man. So somehow this symbolism represents him, but he's a man. And then it tells us his number is 666. So if that beast, and in context, there are two beasts in this chapter. We're speaking in this verse about the first beast. The second beast of this chapter is actually the false prophet, the beast from the earth. The first beast is the one from the sea. The beast that feet like a bear, body like a leopard, mouth like a lion, and so forth. This beast arises off the coast in a manner of speaking of Israel. From the perspective of where Israel resides geographically on earth, the United Kingdom is off in the sea somewhere. And when the United Kingdom sends forces, for example, toward the promised land, toward Israel, they're going to rise out of the sea. And any forces follow it. In this case, Charles is the Antichrist, when the time comes, will rise out of the sea from Israel's perspective. So that being said, that first beast, we do the name calculation. Now, what people have overlooked, even if they recognize that we're talking about a man and that this imagery needs to be here before we can legitimately do the calculation, right? Even if they get that far, what you can't get from the...
Thus, pretty much all of us here have got an emergency food stash. I've got about 3 months' worth.
English here is the identification of the system. In other words, the system on which we're supposed to actually do the calculation is given to us in the Greek text. We're not actually free to go invent a system or contrive a system or try to figure out what the system is. And that is the major mistake that people have made when they've tried to look at this. So let's take a look at the actual system. So that is in my name calculation folder here. And I'll just pull it up for a moment, and then we'll talk about what the Greek text has. So here it is. It's a sequential system. What you're looking at here is an original Hebrew system that's given in the Hebrew text of the Old Testament. So in the Old Testament, most numbers that you would read about in an English translation weren't spelled out. You know, like we would write 6, S-I-X in English, right? Or 7, S-E-V-E-N. But in Hebrew, instead, it would be given as a single character for 7, a single character for 6. Yeah, a single character for 90, a single character for 100. Yeah, in Hebrew. And the difference between these, it's the same character, but one is at the end of a word, one is within a word or at the beginning of a word, but it's the same character in the Hebrew language. Just two ways of writing the hieroglyph, as it were. Okay, so it cut off at 400 because there are only 22 characters or hieroglyphs, if you will, in the Hebrew language, and it's sequential, right? So what happened historically, you know, in the New Testament era and right before it, is this Hebrew system was transferred to Greek. And it was transferred sequentially, not phonetically. And that's how we know it's a sequential system, is by historic precedent.
Hey, Lobo, welcome back.
And so here is the Greek version of the system on the right-hand column. So these are the Greek characters. And in Greek, we expanded to include 500 through 900 because they did that, you know, actually historically.
Come on, jump up. Jump up.
And it's the Greek version of the system,
Jump.
which also is sequential, that's used to specify 666 in our Bibles. In the book of Revelation, the original Greek text, 666 is actually given with these 3 Greek letters right here. So and this is an interesting point, Sean, most of the words in the New Testament that are given in Greek, unlike the Hebrew text, are written out in the form of words like we would write 6 or 7 in English, you know, S-I-X, S-E-V-E-N, E-I-G-H-T for 8, this kind of thing. That's actually how most of the numbers in the New Testament are specified in the underlying Greek text. There are a very small number of exceptions, however, and 2 of them are found in the book of Revelation. One of them is for the 144,000 Israelites who are to be sealed. The number 144 in the Greek text is written using this Greek system with Greek letters. And then the other number is 666. So what you have here is one letter for 600, looks like X. A second letter for 60 looks a bit like, S, really, or like an M turned on its side. And a third letter looks a bit like an S, 46. That's the Greek version of 666. That's what you find in the received text, in the Textus Receptus of the New Testament book of Revelation. It identifies the system for the calculation. Been there all along. And the translators understood this is 600, 60, and 6. And so in the Authorized King James Version, they'd say, 603 score and 6, right? That kind of thing. In English, 666. Well, it turns out when we do the calculation, if we just follow the historic precedent and we translate it sequentially to English, the original Hebrew system, but we cut it off for the last 4 characters. The W has 0 for its value. So we're violating the historical precedent slightly, only because we're not trying to represent the number 600 with that numbering system. We don't need to, because the only point of that was to identify the system in Greek for the Greek readers. The title Charles, Prince of Wales, by which he's been known globally until recently, is exactly 666. And again, that's still his title as the 21st Prince of Wales. But on the original Hebrew system, it's Nasik Charles of Wales. That's how it's given in modern Israeli Hebrew. And I go into detail in the book.
Wow.
Exactly 666 on the original biblical number.
And isn't Charles King of Israel on the slide? I'm pretty sure he is.
System. So 2 different languages, sequential system, original biblical numbering system identified in the Greek text. Same title, Prince Charles of Wales, or as we're going to see, Prince Charles of Satan, of the Red Dragon. Exactly 666. Mathematically, if this is the only thing that we had to go on, this alone is statistically impossible. You'd be hard pressed over billions of years to find any actual name with no tampering using this system that works out to 666. And the universe is actually only thousands of years old. I'm a young Earth creationist, and I believe that. So, but mathematically, this alone is statistically in the realm of not possible, but you're looking at it, it's a fact. And it happens to be in the context of that imagery of that first beast that we were looking at, that I showed on the heraldic achievement here. So if this is literally the only thing we knew about Charles, it would be enough, scripturally speaking, to prove he's the Antichrist. If it's all we have. But we have.
In the series The Chosen, Matthew has Asperger's syndrome, and the way they pull it off, it's really quirky, but I'm going to sound weird here, but very lovable.
Vastly more than this.
Matthew's one of the favourites on The Chosen.
So let's talk about some of the other things that we have. So I'll just mention briefly, I won't show any imagery for this, the lineage. I go into detail on his lineage in the book. You know, people are looking in Judaism, unbelieving Israelites, which I'm not. I'm a believer, right? I'm a Christian. But they're looking for the Messiah to come, and they're looking for him to come from King David's lineage. And I will actually show an image here from Charles at his coronation for a moment, just to put this in a startling context. So what a lot of people don't know is that when Charles was crowned king of, the British Commonwealth, those nations that, accept the British monarchy as their monarchy, or king of England or king of the UK, right, in 2023, he also was crowned king of Israel.
Yeah, I knew
Most
it.
people don't know that. The British monarchy officially claims to sit upon the throne of King David. And the official lineage chart of Queen Elizabeth II, which was actually published a long time ago in London, is available through Prophecy House, my publisher, with the book. People can actually get it. And on that chart, which is the official chart for Queen Elizabeth II's lineage, it claims that they descend from King David, that they are the royal.
Voss, they talked about Hillary's double, and I heard Trump say it, and this was before AI. Trump said, I heard her double's a lot better person. So you're right on Clinton. She died.
House of King David, that they are of King David's line. That's a claim the British monarchy has now made for about a century and a half, officially, roughly. So Charles makes this ascent.
Come on.
Now, what a lot of people also don't know is that the rabbinic community in Israel is aware of the claim. Ronald Reagan was aware of the claim. He referred to Diana as Princess David, knowing that Charles claimed to be a descendant of King David.
Wow.
Israel on national television more than once has announced that Charles specifically is a descendant of King David, based on that lineage and these claims. Now, Israel today doesn't have its genealogical records in most cases, unless you have a last name like Cohen or Levi or this kind of thing. You can't prove what tribe you're from. It's just a family tradition and a lineage that goes back however far you can trace it, right? And the traditions in your family, you say, yeah, I'm of this tribe or that tribe, or I'm an Israelite, I'm a Jew, I'm a whatever. That's the basis of your evidence that you can bring to bear for most people, unless you're a Cohen or a Levite. And the Kohanim, there's actually a genetic test that can be done by blood to know in that case today. But usually you don't know. And so here comes the British monarchy with a documented lineage that goes back thousands of years, literally. And they're saying to Israel, here it is. We descend from King David and from the tribe of Judah. And so the rabbinic community in Israel is looking at that and saying, gee, could that be true? Right? And it's an official claim. So Charles was crowned king of Israel. People don't know that. Now, do I believe that that's a legitimate lineage? Actually, I don't. But what is true, and this is also documented in my book, is he's a descendant from the tribe of Dan, meaning he actually is an Israelite. And there was a tradition
Hey, Dave, welcome back, buddy.
in ancient Judaism and also in the early church that the Antichrist would descend from the tribe of Dan, based on a prophecy in Genesis when Jacob was speaking to his sons, who became the progenitors of the tribes of Israel, prior to his death, when he was blessing them and speaking to them at the very end. He spoke of the tribe of Dan, and he spoke to Dan, and he said, Dan will be a red dragon, by the way, a serpent, by the way, who strikes the horse's heels so that its rider goes backward. And then Jacob exclaimed, I have waited for your salvation, Lord, or Yod-Heh-Vav-Heh, Yahuwah in the Hebrew. And the word for salvation there in the Hebrew is actually Yeshua. It's Jesus' name in Hebrew. I've waited for your Jesus. I've waited for your Yeshua. And the word that's translated as serpent in that prophecy in Genesis in most English Bibles is actually fiery red dragon.
I
It's the
just
same
picked you up 2 minutes
Hebrew
ago.
word that's used in Genesis for the serpent that
I'm not
deceived
doing
Eve
this
in the
all
Garden of
day.
Eden.
Come on.
And how do we know that fiery red dragon is a legitimate translation? Because in Revelation chapter 12 in the New Testament, that's what's used. It speaks of Satan as the fiery red dragon and also as the serpent who deceived Eve.
You watch this guy's videos and you can come to no other conclusion that Charles is the Antichrist. You can't come to any other conclusion. I know there's other candidates. Maybe they're just evil buggers.
In the Garden of Eden. So, all this is to say, Charles didn't bother to portray himself in a Christian sense for his crowning. He put the pagan green man, which is a chimeric lion human head, corpse's head, at the center bottom of his coronation invitation, surrounded by a crown of thorns. And the paganism around this has to do with death and resurrection of the green man. He's portraying himself as the crucified green man that gives life, foliage coming from this corpse's head. Now, scripture tells us the devil goes about as a roaring lion seeking whom he may devour. So here we have a lion human chimeric head representing the pagan green man and crown of thorns right here and death and resurrection, right? How strikingly different from his mother's coronation invitation, and I'll show that one from 1953. And by the way, she was not a Christian, and I'm going to come back to that, but her coronation put traditional emblems of sovereignty, if you will, some of which were ostensibly.
Great advice, Diane. Get some gear. I can't even say. Get some grass labor. You'll sleep on that.
Christian, at the center in place of where Charles put the green man head. This is her coronation invitation, including the orb, which we're going to see is very significant, but that has the crossover that represents Christ over the world, or the British monarchy under Christ over the world, right? Because they put the cross at the top of their crowns. Or Charles usurping that. And I'll come back to the other aspects of his lineage. So he claims descent from King David. Well, a lot of people don't realize that the actual basis for the claims of the royalty, the nobility of Europe to have the divine right to rule, so to speak. You know, in Asian countries, Asian mythology, they'll say they have the divine right to rule. Their kings will, on the basis of allegedly being descended from the red dragon, the serpent, whom they view as a god. A lot of people don't realize that. That's their basis for the claim. The British monarchy and other royalty of Europe have made the claim that they descend from Jesus through this Merovingian lineage, alleging that Jesus, rather than dying on the cross, survived it, had children subsequently with Mary and or Martha, her sister, and that those children were stealthily placed on the thrones of Europe down through the centuries through intermarriage.
Yeah. Diane, at least you know the cannabis is going to work if it's from medical cannabis shop.
And became the lineage of the nobility and the royalty of the European royal houses. Now, that's a fraudulent claim, totally anti-Christian, fake Christian claim, right? Biblically. But this is the real claim that they're making behind the scenes for the so-called divine right to rule. Now, why is that significant with Charles? He actually believes it. He believes he descends from Jesus also. But there are two versions for how Mary and her Martha were impregnated. One was that Jesus did it, in this Merovingian mythology. The other is they were raped by a sea serpent, a red dragon. So, merging with the Asian mythology, in other words, for the divine right to rule, so to speak. And when we come back to Charles here, we come back to this thing too. A lot of people, when they were watching his coronation, they called this an eagle flask that had the anointing oil. And the oil, by the way, that filled this for his 2023 coronation was produced on the Mount of Olives in Jerusalem, from olives grown on the Mount of Olives, in Jerusalem, by various factions over there, including Anglican, Protestant, Greek Orthodox, etc. And then they filled this flask with it, and they think people were told this is an eagle, but it isn't an eagle. Do you recognize what that is, Sean?
A phoenix.
I don't. I used to do a lot of bird watching when I was a young person as well. Doesn't look as
phoenix. It's a
phoenix. Okay.
And it's standing atop fiery flames. That's what's being portrayed.
I saw a phoenix on YouTube probably 8 or 9 years ago, and it was something flying in the air and it was on fire. I don't know if it was a bodgy video or not, but they were actually showing a phoenix.
The phoenix rising from the ashes. So in other words, you have, again, the intimation of death and resurrection with the phoenix going back to ancient Egyptian mythology. And it was from this that Charles was anointed behind the screen. And, and I'll mention just a couple other things in relation to his coronation here. Well, I'll mention 3 other things, and there were a lot of things that I cover in my book on it.
Lobo, poor upbringing. You're an adult now, forget your upbringing and just do the righty.
But this is the screen that was in front of him when he was being anointed. And nobody was allowed to see it. It was the first time in history where people weren't allowed to see the oil being poured on the monarch's head. First time. And it was also the first time where the audio of what was being said was hidden from the audience. They sang hymns and this kind of thing while he was being anointed, so nobody could hear what was being said behind the screen, right? When that oil was being poured on his head. Now, right after this, when he came out, the Archbishop of Canterbury called the world to pledge allegiance to Charles. Another thing never done before in history. So my question is, did the devil possess Charles at the time he was being anointed? Was the call actually to pledge fealty to the devil in Charles at the time that occurred? The fact is, we don't know. But I'm speculating here, and I have speculated, and I think that that's probably what occurred. Now, another interesting thing about this tree, ancient Babylonia was portrayed in the book of Daniel in the Old Testament as this giant tree, that gave shade to the other kingdoms, if you will, of the world that Babylonia ruled at that time, under the king of Babylon, Nebuchadnezzar.
Never thought you were, Lobo.
Well, the leaves of this tree, if people want to go look up high-resolution versions, have the names of the Commonwealth nations. This is the tree of the Commonwealth. And Under it is a banner that basically says, all will be well, all manner of things will be well, kind of thing, under this tree. And at the top of it, it's actually portraying Lucifer, the day star, if you will, the devil, as a star at the very top above the tree. But anyway, they're proclaiming Charles' coronation, and at the base of the tree, and that tree represented Nebuchadnezzar in the Old Testament, the king of Babylon. At the base of this tree is Charles Rex, his heraldic badge is king, Charles Rex, King Charles III. This imagery, and again, I'm not showing a high resolution version here, folks, but you can pull it up. But that's what that represents. So it's showing that the tree derives from Charles, that he's the one who upholds it. He's at the base. Okay, so moving on from that, there was a cross that allegedly had splinters from the actual cross of Christ at the coronation, produced for Charles, these splinters given by the Roman Catholic Church. All the people who officiated, the priests at Charles' coronation, wore Roman Catholic garb robes donated by the Roman Catholic Church. Most people don't know that. They weren't wearing Anglican Protestant garbs. They were wearing Roman Catholic garbs. Because Charles has been trying to reunify Anglican Protestantism and Roman Catholicism stealthily for decades, working behind the scenes with Pontiff on that. And then the final thing I'll show here on the coronation is this. I don't know if you've got audio, but I'll just show the video here for a moment. I'll pause it for a sec. Notice this figure here that I'm circling with my mouse.
Yeah.
That may have been a verger in a robe with a staff that looked like the angel of death, with his sickle going past. But this was the day of the coronation. And nothing happens by accident when you're there in Westminster Abbey already. And you've got a verger in full view of the global audience, a verger presumably, but nobody's really sure, passing that entrance, looking like the angel of death, carrying a sickle. And in fact, a lot of people around the world, when they saw this, they said, what?
I think the Pope's a false prophet, and my Wizard of Oz says he's a false prophet as well.
What is that? Is that the angel of death? The Grim Reaper? At Charles' coronation, what's going on? Right? People literally said that. They literally thought, because they didn't understand that could be a verger, right? In a robe looking like the angel of death. But that was the imagery that was invoked, which was shocking to a lot of people. So, moving on from there, let's go back to his July 1969 investiture just briefly. What I want to point out to folks is that the red dragon was central to the whole thing. So right here on this
Diane, what do you think that means about BlackRock?
very well slate
Come on,
platform
doggy.
that looks a bit like a
Jump,
flying
jump,
saucer
jump.
from above
Jump and you can
are
move
three
your game.
thrones,
Jump.
only one of which has a backrest, and that's the central one that the Queen is sitting upon. The other two don't have backrests. On her throne, the one with the backrest, the red dragon is engraved in gray Welsh slate. Behind her are these red dragon banners. To the left and right of her and Charles and Prince Philip are more huge red dragon banners. Behind Charles and in front of the Queen, as she's seated here, are more.
Yeah, we agree, Dave. None of us, I don't think any of us go to a church. If anything, this is my church here doing this. We're all talking about Jesus. We're all here on his behalf. So I think this is our church.
Huge red dragon banners. This is the interior of the open-air Caernarvon Castle. On the exterior of the castle, at the gates and the entrances, were more red dragon banners that were hung and/or emblems of Charles' heraldic achievement as Prince of Wales, the graven versions. Now, what's significant here is that later, when Charles knelt to face the Queen, as she put the coronet on his head to coronate him Prince of Wales, he was facing that dragon, and so was she. It literally encircled them, and he was facing the dragon on the backrest of her throne, from which she stood up, literally facing it through her, when she put the crown on his head. So why do I point all that out? Because it's literally true of Charles, that the dragon gives him his power, throne, and great authority. It is not, and I'm going to come back to this, not as monarch that he gains his global authority. It's as the 21st Prince of Wales, as the Prince of Darkness, as Satan's prince. Now, people may look at this and say, well, okay, so he's the 21st Prince of Wales. William's the 22nd. There were 20 other princes of Wales prior to Charles, right?
Mm-hmm.
Only a few of those in history were invested, like Charles. William is not going to be invested. Charles is the only one with whom the Red Dragon was ever associated at an investiture, I believe, to my knowledge. The only one. And he's the only one for centuries to have the Red Dragon actually as part of his heraldic achievement, in addition to that, regardless of name. So it's literally true of him that the dragon gives him, as that first beast, the beast with feet like a bear, body like a leopard, mouth like a lion, and etc., his power, his throne, and great authority. Now here's the Queen presenting him later. You can see the dragon is on either side of him, left and right. That same dragon. And then here's the badge of the Black Prince.
Shawnee, I don't think I'd bow to any man. The only person I'd bow to is Jesus Christ.
With 3 ostrich feathers. Now we looked at Hebrew for 666, the numbering system, a bit ago, showing that Charles, Prince of Wales, is 666 in English and Hebrew on that system. Well, these ostrich feathers had the shape of the Hebrew letter Vav. And in Hebrew, the letter Vav, the number assigned to it is 6. So this is another version of 666, with the dragon on either side and Charles above, being presented to the world as ruler of the world with the orb at the top of his head, right here. As Prince of Wales, wearing a crown designed to look like the crown of thorns. It's actually created with nails, gold nails, all around.
Wow, I've never seen that before. Wow, that's a blowout.
On this crown, based on Edward's crown originally, very simple crown. So, ich dien, what does that mean? It means I serve. Ich dien, I serve in German. So on
I
Charles,
serve
for all the
666.
as Prince of Wales, this imagery that we looked at a bit ago, you read it top to bottom, left to right, our left as we're looking at it, even though it's really the right-hand side from the perspective of the heraldist. It reads, I, the Black Prince, this is the badge of the Black Prince. Or I, 666. With those 3 ostrich feathers. And this is the ring. This is the image that Charles has worn on his signet ring for decades, including at his coronation. I, the Black Prince, or I, the Black Princess, is the shield of the Black Prince, with 15 gold beacons representing crusade.
See that shield? Trump's got that on Trump Tower.
Coins when the Crusaders captured Jerusalem from the Muslims. So it's I, the Black Prince, or I, the Black Prince, serve the Red Dragon, serve Satan. That's how you read this. Now, there was a Crusader title taken first by Godfrey de Bouillon, one of those of the Merovingian lineage, which was King of Jerusalem, because they captured Jerusalem from the Muslims. That Crusader title has been passed down historically to whomever was the most prominent monarch or of the royal line of that Merovingian dynasty or lineage historically. As it turns out, Charles has the strongest of those lineages, as I document in the book. So he could.
Isn't Baal also known as Marduk? And you say he's fiction. He's not fiction. He's a real small Jew god.
based on that
And I think he's the God of Islam.
lineage, take the Crusader title, King of Jerusalem, for himself as well, if he wished to do it one day. So I'll just say one more thing about this. This is the Harp of Ireland. This is the Red Lion
Yeah.
of Scotland. A lot of people mistake this for the Red Dragon. It's a lion. The Red Lion of Scotland on the Royal Shield. And then what normally are 6 lions or 6 lion leopards, 4.
Why does a red lion have to mean Scotland? Please explain.
Or England on the Royal Shield. And then you have 4 more that is on the Shield of Wales here in the center. So there are 10 lions normally. Well, you would say normally 6, but for Charles, they're actually all lion leopard pairs. And I show an enlarged version of these in the book, in the Antichrist and Cup of Tea.
Lion, leopard, bears, all in the one body. Do you think that's hybrids, guys? Do you think they're talking about hybrids?
7 of them have their heads unobscured on this. 3 have their heads obscured. So again, it's this idea of 10 with 3 plucked up by the roots, in a manner of speaking. But this is representing the coronations of the United Kingdom, and Charles being over them, and that's also the Commonwealth, right? In the Old Testament, these lions are called the lions of Tarshish. Now, theologians have looked at Tarshish in the Old Testament and they think, well, that might be Spain or Gibraltar, the Strait of Gibraltar, but actually that's incorrect. Even back then in the Old Testament, England was what now is England, that those isles were trading, even with the Promised Land, that territory that was Israel's even that long ago. And seafaring Danites from the
I think England had a lot of tin. Ancient Rome used to mine it as well.
Of Dan made their way to what historically became the United Kingdom in Jeremiah's day. And that actually is how the British monarchy ultimately descends from the Danites. So I've documented that as well in the Antichrist and the Cup of Tea book. Now, another thing is Charles claims descent from Muhammad. So we've got David and Jesus so far, right? Both probably fake lineages, actually descended from the tribe of Dan, however. He claims descent from Muhammad through what's known as the Hashemite lineage. So George King Hussein makes that claim because he's an Hashemite. Saddam Hussein made that claim as an Hashemite before he was killed. Charles descends directly from Muhammad. He's of that same lineage. Why is that significant? Because
it's more significant than you know. He's in charge of the Muslims. Wow.
With other things that I document in the book, he is a shoo-in to be the Mahdi of Islam. And he is the most popular Westerner, bar none, to the Muslims of the Middle East and the world, period. And has been since basically almost July 1960.
Surely there's rumors they're reptilians. And to be honest, I actually believe in the reptilian stuff. I really do say to you guys.
No.
So apparently they can turn reptilian. And I think Queen Elizabeth was a sacrifice.
From that lineage and for other reasons. So one thing your audience may not know, Sean, is that Charles has an honorary doctorate in Islamic studies.
Wow.
He converted to Islam in the 1990s under one of the most prominent Sunni Muslims in the world, the Guardian of Islam, also documented in the book. So he's got an honorary doctorate in Islam. So far as Muslims are concerned, he is a Muslim. And he claims descent from Muhammad. So all that is documented and a whole lot more around that in the book. And apart from that, he's an Assyrian, a Babylonian, a
Dave, I think the Catholics created Islam to get the Arabs. That's what I think.
Roman by lineage, historically.
And look how both of them really worship and deify Mary. Like, they all pray to Mary. Mary's dead. She can't hear.
Obviously an Israelite, a Greek, a French, a German, a Russian, almost an Egyptian, and descending from ancient pharaohs. Any lineage of note historically since Noah's flood Yeah, in the history of the world that could be called royal or prominent, significant for some religious reason, Charles has that descent. Obviously, his sons do as well. But his sons don't have this imagery, and they don't have the name calculation, and they never will. That means neither William nor Harry can be the Antichrist. I've seen people out there saying, well, William, they invent some system to try to show 666, not using the biblical system for William. And then they'll look at William's heraldic achievement and go,
Okay, you say there never was a Muhammad. Well, where did the Quran come from? Just curious, where do you say the Quran come from then? Don't tell me the Catholics.
I'll point to this thing and they'll say, see, he's got the red dragon too. And they don't understand that actually, no, that's the red lion of Scotland. It's not the dragon of Wales at all. So, in 1953, Elizabeth II declared that, or pardon me, 1953, Wales, to get my history right, made the red dragon their national symbol. Even though they'd used it for many centuries, prominently, they made it the official national symbol of Wales in 1953. In 1958, Elizabeth II created Charles, Prince of Wales, and declared to Wales and to the world that in the future, she would present her son for an official investiture to the people of Wales when he was older, when he was a young man, which she did in July 1969. Between those things,
Baghdad, is that in Iran?
And before them, Elizabeth II was involved in Gorsedd Druidry, which is satanic druidry in Wales. The Red Dragon of Wales is their official symbol at the center of Gorsedd Druidry. It's not harmless, and it's not just a bunch of bards or hypocrites, actors, like they will claim to the public. They are literally Satanists, the Gorsedd Druids. And so Rowan Williams, who was a Gorsedd Druid, an Archbishop of Canterbury, was one of them, right? Well, the royal family, and I'm including not just Elizabeth II or Prince Philip, but their parents, in this case, Elizabeth II's parents, Charles' grandparents, and then their grandparents before them and their parents before them, all involved in Gorsedd Druidry in Wales, in forest ceremonies. And you can see both photographs and video footage of Elizabeth when she was still princess, participating in Gorsedd Druidry in the forest with the red dragon at the center. And you can see the same thing for Charles' grandparents. I bring that up, and by the way, also, of course, later for Prince Philip. I bring all that up because also in 1953, right after she became queen, Elizabeth II had her own event at Caernarvon Castle. And central at that event was the Red Dragon, just like in July 1969. It was on the cover of the Order of Service, the thing that she and the audience members held in their hands. Yeah, and world leadership was present for that event, not just people of the Commonwealth. It was before her when she appeared at the Queen's Gate in 1953 herself, as a brand new queen. It was right below her in a huge symbol where we saw the red dragon on either side and the badge of the Black Prince beneath Charles and the Queen, and under his graven heraldic achievement as this imagery that's on our screen here, the graven version. When we saw that in 1969, in her case in 1953, instead, it was just one huge version of the Red Dragon of Wales. What am I saying? I'm saying she was a Satanist. And you know this, and your audience, if they've been paying attention to you for a while, know that Satanists and non-Christians have infiltrated not just Roman Catholicism, but the church at large. Many denominations around the world, but especially Anglican Protestantism and things that have come from it, and Roman Catholicism. And I don't hold that Roman Catholicism was ever Christian. From my perspective, it was never a Christian church. It was always the world's largest fake Christian cult, anti-Christian cult. That was true forever. Now, Anglican Protestantism has been Christian at times, and the schism came out of Roman Catholicism originally, and that's how Henry VIII got the title defender of the faith originally. It was conferred by the Pope, and he was still a Roman Catholic, and they were talking about Roman Catholicism.
Oh,
Well, the British
man.
monarchy decided, no, we like that title, we'll keep that. You know, when they formed Anglican Protestantism under Henry VIII, who was not obviously faithful, he had
Oh,
a number of
stop it.
wives
Your mum's gone away.
executed and did a lot of other bad things. But we got the authorized King James Version translation, which was a very good translation for the time, from the Hebrew and Greek, you know, under Anglican Protestantism, under him and those who came after. But at any rate, Charles came along in our time and said, no, I don't like that title, Defender of the Faith. I want to defend everybody who's of quote unquote faith. Faith in anything. In other words, not the faith. As long as you're not claiming there's only one God and one way to salvation and one truth, spiritually speaking, that leads to heaven rather than hell. As long as you're not claiming that, I'm good with that. That's Charles Tack. I want to be defender of faith. So in fact, he changed it.
Nebuchadnezzar was a golden head in that statue. He had the best empire.
For his coronation to that, to defender of faith. Among other things, one of the other things he did is he had other religious, quote unquote, traditions.
Shawnee Gabe's just gone away for a couple of weeks down to her family. And I think the dog's Jerry. Yes, that's why she's crying.
Participating in the coronation and actually handing some of the items for the coronation to him and to others.
I just picked you up even less than 2 minutes ago.
Sikh and Hindu and
Keep doing
Buddhist
this, I'm not
and
picking you up.
unbelieving Israelite, Jew, Muslim, Hindu participation, all of that was part of his coronation as king. Never done before in history in any coronation of a British monarch. Not even when they were Roman Catholic, never. So he went full pagan, in other words, in his coronation. Full everything except the truth. And then, through the Archbishop of Canterbury, the devil called the world to pledge allegiance to Charles, fealty to Charles, if they were willing. Okay. What's happened since his coronation? Oh, sorry, let me.
Latif Rashid, yeah, but who's he with? Is he with the Muslim Brotherhood? Who's he actually with? That's what I mean. Who runs Iraq now?
Go back to the British monarchy is the German monarchy. They are the French monarchy. They are not just the Greek or English monarchy. And in fact, they changed their name from a German name after World War I to the House of Windsor. Because World Wars I and II were both fomented in Germany.
Yeah.
And we're now looking at the same thing with World War III, potentially with Ukraine. And do you know what is sitting in Germany that's unique?
What?
In the book of Revelation, the Lord says he knows where Satan's throne is. Are you familiar with the verse? It's talking about Pergamum, which was in Turkey. You know, geographically and historical context, when that verse in Revelation was
Barack Obama got sworn in on a replica of that Pergamon Satan's seat.
penned, written by the Apostle John, under inspiration, there was a throne in Pergamum that is now located in a Berlin museum in Germany. And it's been there since right before World War I. It is the throne of the devil, according to Revelation. The Pergamum throne. One of his thrones, apart from.
Oh, that's why the Germans went after the Jews, because Satan was leading them. I knew he was leading them, but I didn't know it was as blatant as that.
On the one in London where Charles sits, you could say. So you could say that's very interesting then, that the three world wars, certainly the first two and perhaps the third, were fomented out of Germany. Now NATO is going to break up, and I cover that in my book from 2018 called North Korea, Iran, and the Coming World War. I'll just show this briefly. So I started writing this one back in 2007, where I identify the rider of the second horse of the apocalypse. I pointed out Charles is the fourth horseman, right? The top dog Antichrist over history will be possessed by the devil, if you will, and who will come in as that little horn, the eyes of man over a global government in the future, preceding Armageddon. Well, the rider of the fiery red horse, the second seal, the second horseman of the apocalypse, who also is an Antichrist, is identified in this book. But also, that second seal has to do with World War III, among other things. And it ties in with North Korea, Russia, China, Iran, and I think most interestingly, with Magnolia Oil Corporation and then Mobil Oil and now ExxonMobil, which has a stake in Russian oil. A lot of people don't know that. And in India, processing oil from Russia. Currently, all that oil that's being brought into India from Russia to process, a lot of it is going through ExxonMobil for refinement and to then go elsewhere in the world. A lot of people don't know that. So, and then Rex Tillerson, who was the former CEO of ExxonMobil, was the Secretary of State when this book was published under Trump. So this is from 2018, but I talk about Russia's invasion of Ukraine and what comes next. And here we've seen the pause at this point in Ukraine. But the rest of what's coming, including how World War III will develop, China going after Taiwan, North Korea going after South Korea and Guam and Japan and so forth.
Wouldn't be a stream if I didn't cough.
The attack on the U.S. ostensibly that will occur with all of that, et cetera, all of that in this book. Now, the important point in this to understand is that World War III comes before the global government. It comes before the Great Tribulation. Those seals are in sequence. It's roughly a seal per year in Revelation chapter 6. It's the fourth year, the midpoint of it, where the global government is constituted under Charles. Now, he's in his 70s, right? A lot of people look at him and they say, well, he's not young. The Antichrist has to be young.
Doesn't say
But that is not a biblical criterion at all.
Yeah, it doesn't say his age.
And when we're talking about a counterfeit Christ, why can't he just as well be old? You know, the opposite of the real Christ. Old and ugly and stale. Rather than young and virile and tough. You know, Christ was a carpenter's son, probably, you know, a pretty tough, physically looking person.
I remember that.
But you're talking...
Shawnee, I remember that, the playing cards in the Iraq Second War. I remember that. They had Saddam's sons as the jokers, I think.
About the opposite of that right now, ostensibly with Charles, though he was very athletic when younger. You know, went through training that would be almost equivalent to special forces training. You know, commanded a minesweeper, has flown aircraft as well, helicopters and military planes. Been a polo player, which is a somewhat dangerous sport. You know, daredevil skier, a lot of things you can point to about him that are not anything than what a lot of folks would call a man's man, so to speak, right? But now he's old. Does that mean he can't be the Antichrist? No, it doesn't. Doesn't mean he's going to kick.
Vas, I said that Obama got sworn in on a replica of Pergamon.
The bucket because he got cancer? No, it doesn't. And in fact, they've said he's recovering well from that. Lots of people live with cancer. And I'll just say, I'm a survivor of cancer. More than a decade ago. For me. Stage 4 cancer. There are people who survive cancer. Charles is going to survive. He won't die until he's killed at Armageddon. But what about his age? Well, both of his parents, who are now deceased, Elizabeth II and Philip, they were both nearly 2 decades older than he now is when they died. And his mother remained on the throne to the end. So purely biologically speaking, there's no reason you can't live long enough for these things to be fulfilled. There are other things we can look at scripturally. We can look at biblical chronology. But let me come to another thing before I go into that. I said that there's lots of other evidence concerning Charles. And despite everything that I'm sharing here, folks, I am, in fact, actually only scratching the surface of what's in the book in many cases.
Yeah, Shawnee. What was I going to say? You confused me, doggy. Yeah, Saddam Hussein did work for the CIA when they were fighting Iran, but eventually they fell out, and that's why the CIA turned on him.
And what you're looking here is the actual idol, a miniature version of it that's to go on the Temple Mount.
It's about 9 times I picked you up in 20 minutes,
in the
dog.
early 2000s to Charles, years after the first edition of the Antichrist in Captivity was published. That was published in 1998. I started it in 1987. And lo and behold, years later comes the abomination that causes desolation. But it's not on the Temple Mount yet. And there's no holy place to stick it in on the Temple Mount yet in Jerusalem.
Perfect.
How do I know this is that statue? Well, I'm going to come back to that. But some of the features of this idol are that it has Charles' face, explicitly has Charles' face. It represents him hovering over a mass of humans looking up to him as savior of the world, quote unquote. The base of this statue is inscribed with
Shawnee, one of the reasons they went after Saddam Hussein is the Americans gave him a printing press to print money, and it was the same printing press that the Americans use, and it's very restricted who uses it, and that's where he got all their millions he was found with.
the words savior of the world, British spelling, Savior of the world.
That was one of the reasons for the war, to get the machine back.
And the Brazilian government that commissioned this, it was the Brazilian government of Tocantins, were hailing Charles as the savior of the world, hence the green marble.
Mum's going well, though.
And one of these individuals underneath is holding a bottle of wine, red wine, officially, according to the description of the statue. So he's either crushing the heads of those beneath him, or he's hovering over them, depending on the article you read. And it's Charles with angelic wings, dressed only in a loincloth, nothing else, and hovering over these bodies as the ecological savior of the world, quote unquote. Now, this was right after the Rio Earth Summit, which is documented even in the first edition of the Antichrist Cup of Tea. I think it was, yeah, because it was right before that book was published. But at the Rio Earth Summit, that was the first major global eco-fascist, I'll say, climate agenda agreement ever in history. Charles personally was credited by global leadership, including Al Gore, for the success of that summit. He specifically was singled out. And that's the reason this statue was commissioned by our Brazilian state government later. Why was he singled out? Because he called for and he held meetings aboard the Royal Yacht Britannia before it was decommissioned. And he chaired those meetings to hash out the issues that would be addressed at the Rio Earth Summit beforehand. So Al Gore, the president of Brazil, other global leaders said the reason the summit itself was a success was because of Charles. Now, that summit led to the Kyoto Protocol, which the United States didn't sign on to, which in turn led to the COP agreements, the Conference of the Party Climate Agenda Agreements of the United Nations, subsequently. The most significant of
You better get on to the Pope soon.
those was the one in Paris, and I believe it was 2015, Paris, France, until the most recent one. And at that gathering in Paris, you had the largest gathering of international leaders in the entire history of
Who's the dog you hear barking, Dave?
the world at one place, anywhere, ever, still to this day. 150 plus heads of nations and 190 plus global leaders overall. You had Barack Obama there, for example. Now, this was in France.
So you're talking about that red painting of Charles? That was pretty bad, wasn't it?
So you would think that the leader of France would have opened the event and given the first speech, perhaps, since he hosted it, right? Or if not him, maybe Barack Obama, because he's the leader of the most powerful nation on earth at that time, ostensibly. Why not him? Or maybe Al Gore, because people think of the climate agenda or the climate scam, however you want to view it, and they think Al Gore must be him. Why not him? He was there. But actually, it turns out it was Charles who opened the event and Charles who gave the first speech. Why? And at the center of the group photo later, who was at the center in the position of prominence under the Paris signage? Charles, not anybody else. He was at the center of all those world leaders of the photo, very center. So there's a reason for all that. And this statue, by the way, Genesis 3:15. The very first prophecy in Scripture about a coming Messiah was given to Eve in the Garden of Eden after Adam and Eve fell. And this is the prophecy where God himself is speaking to the devil, the red dragon. And he says, I'll put enmity or conflict, warfare between you and the woman and between your seed. So the devil has his own seed, individually and collectively. And her seed, that seed is Messiah, right? But God has his seed individually and collectively. We individually as Christians are God's seed, but collectively we are in Christ, in Messiah. He's the seed. And her seed. He, the woman's seed, in this case Messiah, will crush your head, bruise your head. Now the Hebrew word that's translated as bruise here means pierce, crush, stab. It means all of those things, and bruise. And you shall bruise his heel. Pierce, crush, stab. And the word translated heel is more literally translated protuberant. Anything that sticks out from the body, in other words. Well, gee, my head sticks out from my body. So do both.
Never heard that word before.
Both of my feet and both of my hands. In other words, Christ was pierced in his hands and his feet. He's going to come back and pierce the devil's head. In this case, the Antichrist head, who is possessed by the devil. Typologically. And crush the heads of those who are in the devil rather than in the woman's seed, in Christ. So in the Antichrist, the spirit of Antichrist, rather than in the Spirit of Christ, the Spirit of God, the Holy Spirit, right? Okay. Well, what we're looking at with the statue
Will do, Keith.
is a perversion and inversion of Genesis 3:15. Here comes Charles as the Messiah to crush the heads. Gee, that's not right. Okay.
Lord, Keith asked us to pray for his health. That's what we're doing, Lord. We're praying for his health. Hope you deliver. We love you, Lord. Amen.
Well, it gets really more interesting here in Daniel chapter 9, verse 27. And I am probably the first person ever to notice this in the Hebrew text, and I wrote about it in the second edition, the 2024 edition of the Antichrist Captivity, where I go into the Hebrew text, the root words. But this is the verse that Christians look at, and they say, well, there's going to be a 7-year period before Armageddon and before Christ's return, a 7-year tribulation period or tribulation week. That has the Great Tribulation, the latter half of it, and it has its last 3.5 years. They look at this verse to suggest, based on the context of the verse, which is Daniel 9:24 to 26, that there's a period of 490 years, or 70 periods of 7, and this is the final 70th period of 7, therefore it's a period of 7 years. That's how they look at it. Others have looked at this and said, no, it's about Christ's crucifixion, because it sounds eerily similar, with him being crucified at the midpoint of the week, if they accept that he was crucified on a Wednesday, rather than a Thursday or a Friday, the fourth day of the week, in other words, for the crucifixion. And that he was resurrected at the end of the weekly Sabbath, the end of the seventh day, rather than on Sunday. In other words, between the days, at the exact end of the seventh day, at the exact beginning of the first day of evening, biblically. Only God could cut the days that finely, so to speak, in terms of timing. But setting that aside, and I have a whole series devoted to that called Messiah, History, and the Tribulation Period that's coming, where I show that all the weeks of Scripture are patterned after the crucifixion week, and that Christ, in fact, was crucified on the fourth day of the week and resurrected at the end of the weekly Sabbath. That's actually what's true. Setting that aside, when we look at this verse in context and understand we're actually most literally looking at a period of 7 years, not 7 days. So not the crucifixion week, but a week that may be patterned after the crucifixion week, but nonetheless a week of 7 years. In this verse, it says he, and the context is this prince of Roman lineage. And it's a prince who sits on the throne, or a ruler of Roman lineage. In this case, it's the Antichrist in context. That little horn of the eyes of man from earlier, Daniel 7. Then he shall confirm. And the Hebrew word there is gabor. It means make stronger, strengthen, or impose, or enforce. So in other words, it's not necessarily something that Israel will agree to. A lot of people think the Antichrist is going to sign a treaty with Israel. That's how we'll recognize him. That is not true biblically, and that is not what Scripture is actually talking about. Instead, he's going to come along, and under him, this treaty, this covenant, is going to be imposed or enforced upon the parties. In other words, whether they like it or not, this is how it is when the time comes. Most of the world will agree to it because it's a covenant, it's a treaty. But he's going to make it gabor. In other words, he's going to strengthen it.
Last, there is a debate on what day Christ rose, because he's supposed to die on Friday and rise on Sunday. That's not 3 days in the grave. Apparently, he got crucified on the Wednesday, and I'm not sure how much when he woke up, but there is debate on it. So this guy is not necessarily giving us misinformation.
He's strengthening it. He's going to make it strong. He's going to impose it or enforce it. Did you know, Sean, at the meaning of the English?
Same as Christ was born in 4 BC, but it says AD and BC, that starts at 70.
Charles, the name
It didn't make sense.
is strong man or make strong.
No.
Yep. That's the meaning of Charles' name. So make strong or strengthen a covenant or a treaty with many. In the Hebrew, it's la rabim, and rabim is the Hebrew word for many, but it has the same root word as Rabinovich, Yitzhak Rabin, who signed the Oslo Accords, Oslo I and Oslo II, and was killed right after Oslo II. Whole other discussion, and I won't get into it today, but I will say that I document in the book and in a coming multi-volume series called Israel, quote unquote, Peace and the Looming Great Tribulation. And folks, please understand, I have dozens of books still coming, most of which have been worked on for more than a decade each. So they're all going to come out in short succession. It's going to be like an explosion of books from me all at once. But in the Antichrist and Cup of Tea book, and in that coming multi-volume series, I point out that the entire false Mideast peace process has been under Charles from the beginning, going back to the London Agreement of 1987 between Jordan's King Hussein and Charles. So that's documented in my book. And so the Oslo process, the roadmap and the quartet, and that's the stage we're at now, still the roadmap and the quartet, apart from the Saudi Peace Initiative, which ties to the Abraham Accords. All of that has sat under Charles and people who directly report to Charles to this day. I mention all that simply to put context to this verse and the covenant that's going to be imposed under Charles as the Antichrist. And again, all of this is documented in my book. I come with receipts, and you've seen today, I don't just say stuff without evidence. I come with biblical receipts. Every single thing I'm saying is documented with footnotes and the original sources in every book I put out. I never say anything without giving the source, and I make it verifiable. So coming back to this, the Hebrew text here, where we read in our English here, and on the wing of abomination shall be one who makes desolate. Now, in the Gospels, in the Olivet Discourses, Christ talked about the desolating abomination based on this verse, that stands where it shouldn't stand. When it's in place, let those who are in Judea flee to the mountains of the wilderness. That's basically what he says in the Olivet Discourses in the Gospels, referring to this thing here. But the translation here in English is actually very poor. And what the Hebrew text is actually talking about is not just a wing or extremity of a future temple or holy place. It's talking about an idol with outstretched wings in the Hebrew text that's actually dressed only in a loincloth. That also is in the Hebrew root words of the text of this verse. And you can't see it in the English translation, just like you can't see the numbering system for calculating 666 in Revelation 13:18 in an English Bible, even though the Greek text specifies the system to use. So the Hebrew text is actually describing a statue with outstretched wings dressed only in a loincloth. Now that's significant not only because the name Charles is intimated in the same verse, and there is now a statue, there has been since the early 2000s for Charles, showing him with outstretched wings dressed only in a loincloth. But it's significant because that statue historically is modeled after statues of Jupiter for the Romans and Zeus for the Greeks.
Yeah.
And a version of this was placed, in this case of Zeus, in the holy place in the temple that Antiochus IV, so-called Epiphanes the Great, who desecrated the temple in the 2nd century BC under the time of the Maccabees, from which we got Hanukkah, the Feast of Dedication in the New Testament and the Old Testament in between the Testaments, I should say, and then in the New Testament. We got that feast when the temple was cleansed after Antiochus IV had desecrated the temple and sacrificed a pig on the altar, and he set up an idol, according to some accounts, of Zeus there in the holy place. Exactly what's being described in Daniel 9:27. Only in the case of Daniel 9:27, it's later in history. It's not yet fulfilled. So Antiochus, in other words, was typologically a type of the Antichrist, of Charles as the Antichrist. And if one goes and looks at those idols to Zeus and Jupiter from the Greeks and the Romans, they'll typically find that it was a man either completely naked or dressed in a loincloth with a bird of prey, like a vulture or an eagle, next to him. And often he'd be putting his hand on the head of that bird of prey. But once in a while, that idol was portrayed with the wings itself of that bird of prey. So we have here Charles actually portrayed as Zeus or Jupiter. In other words, this is the idol that's going to go on the Temple Mount. Now, the artist who created this is dead. Mauricio Bentes, and I'm probably not pronouncing that correctly, Portuguese, a Brazilian artist who died not long after this was created. And he handed this to Charles. This version, the one you're looking at, the miniature is about 1.5 feet high, roughly, photographed by the BBC. That's a BBC photo in the early 2000s.
Dave, I used to do music shows on your Saturday. I'd play Australian hits and that. It was good fun. I might start doing that again.
BBC reported on it. And I actually have a 2005 prophecy conference where I shared the audio of that BBC report along with the statue. But the same artist commissioned a larger version of this statue that would be, depending on the account that you read, between 12 and roughly 16 feet high. Exact same thing. Why is that significant? Because depending on which measurement you accept, and there were conflicting news reports, they could be exactly 10 cubits by the biblical measurement of a cubit, also depending upon which measurement of a cubit you accept. It could be precisely 10 cubits in height. Also, I point this out in my book. Now, why is that significant? Because in the second temple, the Temple of Solomon, there were two angelic statues placed on either side of the Ark of the Covenant, the lid of which had two cherubim, two angels, two cherub. Cherubim is the plural version of cherub. A lot of people say cherubs in English. There were two cherubs portrayed on the lid of the Ark of the Covenant, covering their faces with their wings, but facing toward the center of the Ark where the mercy seat was. But on either side of the Ark, in Solomon's temple, in the Holy of Holies, the holy place, were two 10-cubit high angelic statues representing cherubim. Well, in Ezekiel 40 to 44 in the Old Testament, in the future temple, not the millennial temple, so not the one that is going to be desecrated in the Great Tribulation. But after that, in the millennial temple, when Christ is reigning for 1,000 years on earth, after Armageddon, after he's healed the world from all the devastation and so forth, and after all surviving mankind has become Christian, that temple will not have an ark. There'll be no Ark of the Covenant in that temple in the Holy of Holies. Christ himself is the living word, and a tablet was placed representing God's 10 Commandments, part of the word, inside the ark, right? But we're going to have the living word in the millennial temple. But what's significant is in the tribulation temple, the holy place that's going to be desecrated, this idol is going to be placed, and it's going to be 10 cubits in height, most likely, if it's the full-size version of this. So I think it'll be this exact idol. Could it be a variant instead? Could it be a hologram of this? Or of our dear leader, Charles, not my leader, but, the non-Christian world's leader, giving some spiel in the Holy of Holies, a live hologram? Well, he's already done a live hologram on stage, as has Al Gore in Saudi Arabia. Charles has in the past. He's already done that kind of thing. Could it be this or his first beast heraldic achievement shown in the Holy of Holies, or some combination thereof? I do think so. I think that's what Scripture's talking about. So Charles has, to sum up just some of the core evidence that we've talked about, he has this idol, right? The desolating abomination already exists for him, and it's described in the root words of Daniel 9:27. He has the first beast imagery of Revelation 13, uniquely. No one else has ever had it. No one else ever will. And I should point out in regard to this, that this is not just created because someone wants to make it look a certain way. There are international laws that pertain to heraldry globally. And knights historically that would joust, for example, when they jousted, they'd be identified by the heraldic symbols on their armor because their faces were covered when they were jousting. That was one of the bases for heraldry in England historically and in the UK and the world. But ultimately, there were international laws that were developed. And there are heralds who are professionals. And this achievement was created under the Garter Herald King, who's the most powerful herald in the world, who is over the College of Heraldry in London, following the international laws of heraldry. And what they do as part of that is they take some of the symbols from each parent's heraldic achievements, if each of them has their own, they combine that, and then they add unique symbols for the individual to whom the new heraldic achievement that's unique is being granted. So for Charles, there are unique elements here that will never be on anyone else's heraldic achievement, and the overall combination can never be given to anybody else, not descriptively nor symbolically in terms of the imagery. So William and Harry can never have this, ever, nor can anyone else, past or present or future. And the Garter Herald King was part of the officiation at Charles' investiture of July 1969, and in fact, led Charles to the dice, the round disc that looks like a UFO from above, on which he was crowned. And coming back to this just briefly, there were a couple of things captured on film that I've noted in my book that I don't think anyone else ever noticed. But one involves the Garter Herald King, which is why I'm going to show it here now. This person leading Charles right here is the Garter Herald King. And Charles is about to come out of this entrance right here. This is the Chamberlain Tower, the exit to the interior of Caernarvon Castle from the Chamberlain Tower. And Charles is about to poke his face out right here at the next instant, literally less than a second later. But notice what appears right here outside the entrance to the Chamberlain Tower. It looks like fiery paws vertically up the edge of the entrance, just caught on this frame. And this is the same frame reel of the next thing I'm going to show. In other words, the same camera And the same set of film captured this as the next thing I'm going to show. But Charles was being led. He was about to exit this chamber, and all of a sudden, this, what I call fiery pause, suddenly flashes to the camera. And this camera, which is not digital, captures it. Analog film. And then after this, when the queen is placing this crown on Charles' head that has the world, the globe at the top, you get this thing that I call X lightning. It flashes 5 frames of the camera capture this. And if it was 1 frame or whatever, you might look at this and say, why would somebody scratch the film like that? Right? Why would anybody damage the film like that? And just this one spot out of the entire reel of film. Well, 5 back-to-back frames captured this. What was happening at this moment? Well, here's Prince Philip sitting on his throne with no backrest. Here's the gray Welsh slate throne from which the queen stood up with her backrest, and the dragon is engraved in gray Welsh slate on this throne. Behind it on the castle walls are those huge red dragon banners you saw against white sheets, the red dragon with tassels. Mm-hmm. On the opposite castle wall, in front of this throne and in front of the queen's face, are more huge red dragon banners that she's facing. So behind her and in front of her, same thing with Charles. He's facing the dragon on the throne, but then he's also facing those red dragon banners behind the throne. And then behind him are more huge red dragon.
Okay, Bas, I'm going to finish off with Dave like I usually do.
Red dragon banners, and then to the left and right of both of them,
and Bas.
That it's somehow using these jets, but perhaps we're just guessing. We got some new surprising updates regarding 3i Atlas. This is Tony. Hope you're all doing well. And actually, I had seen a couple coming from Stefan Burns here on YouTube, but this one is brand new from about 40 minutes ago. This is kind of amazing. Now, we have here interstellar comet, 3i Atlas shows jets and first radio signals after sun pass. And actually, what we have here is something rather curious that was discovered. We have Avi Loeb talking about it. We're going to actually show a couple different scientists talking about this, including this guy's face might look a little familiar to you as well. He talked about it a little bit. We'll get into it. But what's interesting is we have here apparently 7 distinct jets showing off 3i Atlas. And what's really amazing is that it changed its trajectory to come even closer to the Earth. Now, this is not something from pure gravitational pull. So they now have confirmation, and I'm going to show you that in a minute here, that this object changed its direction. We were already assuming, or not assuming, but surmising, I guess, that it was changing its direction before this, but now we have actual real concrete evidence that it has indeed changed its direction and is actually going to come closer to Earth around mid-December. And what's amazing about it is these 5 different jets shown here with these lines indicate that it's somehow using these jets, but perhaps we're just guessing because we know it has changed direction. I'm going to get into all this in this video, but the fact that it has all these multiple different jets on it shown distinctly, as you can see here, perhaps these are what are causing it to change its direction. This is what some are postulating. So we have here, we're going to get into all this, my friends. Let's play this clip here first of Avi Loeb with the latest update. This was from yesterday. Check this out.
And now an update on a story that we have been following here at Newsmax, that strange interstellar visitor turning heads among the scientific community. Big questions still remain about 3i Atlas. Now, a lawmaker is pressing NASA for new images of the space phenomenon. And could it also have a traveling companion? We welcome back Dr. Avi Loeb, who's an astrophysicist at Harvard University, for an update on this. Okay, last time you were here, we were waiting to see if this object would seem to maneuver as it got closer to the sun or do anything. What's the verdict there?
Well, thanks for having me. It did maneuver. It deviated from the path that we would have expected it to go through if its trajectory was cut by gravity alone. And the amount of boost to its velocity was equivalent to a jet carrying 5 billion tons of matter that would give it a recoil. Now, as of this morning, some observers noticed that it has a set of jets around it, more than 7. Some headed towards the sun, some away from the sun. It's a spectacular view that we have right now after it passed closest to the sun on October 29th. It became bluer than the sun. It was 5 times brighter than it was before it came close to the sun.
Wow.
So the action is happening
amazing
right now and in the coming days. And
So, I mean, obviously this is not usual. And I've seen these tweets from various scientists claiming, if you think this is more than just a standard comment, there's something wrong with you. Obviously, that's not the case. You have a Harvard professor here. You also have this other scientist who also chimes in saying there's something a little odd about it. Michio Kaku here, who also says something rather interesting. We'll get into that as we get farther into this video. So obviously, there's something different about this, okay? I think the fact that it has multiple jets coming off it, not the usual type of jet, one that was pointing the wrong direction. We now have evidence that it's not only gravity changing its direction, we have numerous other things about it. Its composition apparently is not usual as well. Also, it came in from outside our solar system, the third object like this. That's why it's called 3I Atlas. And we're going to get into actually some other surprising stuff with regarding to this object and the fact that a number of governments are watching this. We also have no space agencies releasing any legitimate photos of it, even
What do you mean, Vas? There's something wrong with you. What do you mean?
though they have the capability to do so. We're going to get into all this and much more, and even a prediction on what this object will do on December, I think it's 19th when it arrives, near the Earth. We now have that it will be closer to Earth because of its recent trajectory correction. However that's happening, I guess it's just a comet, even though it's not using just gravity, obviously, and it clearly doesn't look normal. But we have a prediction from someone who has a good track record, a long track record of getting things correct. He's the one who predicted that our president would have his ear grazed 3 months before it happened. That guy, we're going to get into what he had to say the object was, and you're not going to believe it. We'll get into that in a little bit. First, I'm going to mention food supply, 25-year shelf life. Link is in the description, 4 months worth for $6.97. It's actually 3 months with an extra month. You definitely want to get that. If you have not already, you never know what's next. You've seen how our world has been. You also have this book here, The Lost Ways, how your great-great-grandfather lived without electricity, how to build a cellar, do things around the house as you would need to know how to do if you were for an extended period of time without electricity. Link is in the description, $37, get the print version for that. But check out all of my other social media linked below. Let's get back to the video here. We have this picture of 3I Atlas with multiple jets being seen off it. Some are postulating, obviously, that these are what are controlling its direction potentially. And we obviously know at this point that there's more than just gravity guiding its direction. The probability of it going past Mars, Venus, and Jupiter at such close proximities is virtually impossible on just a random chance level. And I'll show you the probability for that in a minute. But let's play what Stefan Burns is saying about this specific thing with these multiple jets.
We see the solar direction, okay? So sun is over
Yeah, late laugh.
here, and 3 Atlas is going like this. Okay, it's going like that, and we see not one, not two, but five. At least this is what Jaeger identified. 5 different jets coming off of it. One
No way, Vas. It's your birthday. Happy birthday, mate.
tiny one right there.
They're
AT&T.
saying they actually observed more than 7, according to Avi Loeb. There was more than 7 actually observed. Maybe in this picture, they're only showing 5 though.
Very faint one right there, but these 3 are more obvious. 1, 2, 3. So that's quite striking. You also see it on this imagery. And here, in some aspects, it's even easier to see. That forward jet, you definitely see that nicely. Here we see that top one. And then this one, I mean, even maybe
Oh my goodness, there is. It's like it's curved even. It almost looks curved.
you can split it kind of into a fractal dendritic nature.
Wow, that's weird. Look at it. I mean, it doesn't even look straight. I mean, obviously this one back here is straight. That's straight. That's likely straight. That looks like it may be straight. But what's going on here? It almost looks like it's branching off. It's like it's branching off this one. It's so bizarre.
Going like this. This is the coma. It's not the nucleus. We're not going to be able to see the nucleus, the actual object or whatever this thing is, until you can get close enough to kind of pierce through that coma because it'll absorb.
Yeah, I'm guessing that will be later this year in December.
Oh,
when
no,
it
I'm
comes
sick of
near
picking you
Earth.
up. Come
We
on.
also have, of course,
Picked up
American
20 times
physicist
in the stream so
Michio
far.
Kaku
No more.
warns about these videos of 3i Atlas that have divided scientists' researchers on its alien.
Oh, you trod on the remote. Bloody hell.
GMC Yukon Denali. We are professional grade.
Here we are again, happy as can be. All good pals and jolly good company. La-di-da-di-da, oh la-di-da-di-dee.
Its alien and extraterrestrial origins. Actually, what he warns about here is all these fake videos. There's like 1 million fake videos of 3i Atlas, generated by Sora AI or whatever program they're using to make deepfake videos of the actual object. And of course,
Vas, I picked Moo Moo up so many times. I'm not joking, probably 30 times a day. And my left arm, the elbow's got repetitive strain injury. I'm wearing a guard on it because it's so sore. So she's giving me RSI, literally.
reason why there's so many of these fake videos of the object is because NASA refuses to actually release a real picture of it. So also do none of the other space agencies are actually releasing real, legitimate, decent resolution images of the object, even though they can tell us and show us a picture of Pluto's smallest moon. How are you able to take a picture of Pluto's smallest moon? Pluto already is super small, and you got a moon on Pluto.
Vas, she's the most high maintenance animal I have ever seen.
You can take a
She's so high maintenance.
picture of that. Can't take a picture of this object, of course. It's much closer. Obviously, it's a joke. We all know they have a picture and they refuse to release it. Matter of fact, I think that is one of the things he says in another video, which I'm going to show you later. Michio here is telling NASA to release their photos because he's saying that everybody's getting seeing all these fake ones and thinking they're real. Just release the real ones. I mean, makes sense. That's what you should do. I mean, people are joking about this online as well. Every picture of Mars 200 million miles away, every picture of 3i Atlas a blur, right? That's basically what's going on right now. And then you have all these people filling the void by making up Sora AI videos of it, right? So let me get this straight. I can't speak straight either. We can get photos and video of Uranus' tiny moon, but we have to wait another month or two for 3i Atlas to get closer to Earth to be able to take images. I said Pluto earlier, didn't I? I meant Uranus. All right. No joke there. Scientists find tiny new moon around Uranus with James Webb Space Telescope. All right.
It's also known as a hemorrhoid.
This is good stuff. All right. So, can't get a picture of 3i Atlas, though. Even though it went right back past Mars, right? Can't get a picture of it. Just a weird coincidence that it's going right through our solar system, right by 3 different planets, almost precisely. And then it changes its direction a little bit so that it'll get closer to Earth when it goes by in December. Oh, it's just a weird, object, normal comet. Yeah, I mean, give me a break, dude. No comment. The probability of this happening is like basically 1 in a billion, or even probably less than that, if you think about it. With all these planets being that close to it as it goes by, I'll show you that in a little bit. I think I had that open. Michio Kaku breaks silence on NASA's 3i Atlas controversy. Famed scientist has publicly criticized NASA for keeping the latest images of 3i Atlas hidden from the public, saying this isn't something that needs to be classified, unless it does. Unless it does. You see what I mean? Kaku discussed the object's strange physical and chemical behavior, revealing the new data show 3i Atlas has lost its tail after passing close to the sun, something almost...
Guys, if these are ETs, watch Chronicles of Riddoch. That shows an ET that shows up in the atmosphere and takes over, and how they try to convert the people. Pretty good movie.
No natural comet does. And of course, this comet of his, I think is from a day ago. He may not even know about the latest course correction. Discovery sparked intense speculation. Could this be artificial? Dr. Kaku pointed out it estimated age of...
And Vas, I don't know if you noticed, but the uniforms the villains wore, they were scales, like lizards. Their uniforms were scales.
7 billion years and unusually high nickel content, suggesting it might be made of materials far older and tougher than our solar system itself. I also played a clip in a previous video of a former NASA scientist who dealt with the materials, like mechanic.
And Vas, doesn't that sound very much like an AI invasion or ET invasion? That's what'll happen. If they're that powerful, they can do that to us, and there won't be much people can do about it.
Some materials. My background is mechanical engineering, and there is a specialty in mechanical engineering, mechanics of materials. You also have chemical engineers that deal with materials of objects, and nickel is what is commonly used in our space vessels, in our rockets, in our shuttles. We use nickel. All right, we use nickel. We don't use iron. We use nickel, and this object happens to have a large amount of nickel, unlike other comets, which would sort of lend or speculate to the idea it could be a space vehicle. We don't know. The materials itself alone suggest this, on top of the fact that it's not just gravity changing its direction. So you obviously have multiple factors to this. This is not just simply another comet. You guys are just blowing this out of proportion. You also criticize NASA for delaying Mars reconnaissance orbiter images from October 2nd. This is the one I was talking about, warning that unnecessary secrecy only fuels theories. Well, I mean, there's probably a reason why they didn't give us the photos when they turned off the feed. Maybe because there's something there. I mean, but that's just lending the theory. Well, it wouldn't lend to theories. I mean, it would still lend to things if it actually shows something unusual and they give us the picture. It would be the same thing. Obviously not natural. And they don't want us, for some reason, to know for sure. That's why they won't give us any images. Kaku admitted an extraterrestrial origin remains highly unlikely. He even noted that Harvard's Dr. Avi Loeb, known for his propulsion theory, hasn't ruled it out completely. So he hasn't ruled it out either. Neither one of these scientists have ruled out that it could be a UFO or something to that nature. Obviously, if they believe there's life in the universe, it could very well happen, right? So perhaps it's something else.
Choosing health insurance can be discombobulating. Find cover for the stuff you'll actually use with AHM.
Get a photo now and see the difference.
Okay, guys, this is my very summary mango float.